Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today is the Nonfiction November wrap up. It is December 1st, so Nonfiction November is technically over. Please excuse the hat hair. I just got home from work and it is 11 degrees outside, so I am not going anywhere without a hat on. So I think I'm just gonna get into it. I am going to say this, it did not go well. I did not finish Radium Girls. I didn't even get to it, it's still on my shelf. But I did finish 3 books, one of which was on my TBR, 2 of them were not, and then I'm in the middle of 2 of the other ones on my TBR. This is going to be so much fun, but I'll start with the one I finished that was from my TBR from the beginning of the month. That is, I finally finished Chasing Shadows by Greg Scommel with Rhett Talbot. This is such an interesting book. I loved learning about Greg Scommel, how he kind of became a shark expert basically in the North Atlantic, his conservation efforts. It's such a fascinating book. I learned a lot about sharks, and I learned a lot about this guy. And I found some of his stuff, some of the things he had to say very relatable for somebody who wanted to at one point go into marine biology. I found it so interesting. I learned a lot more about white sharks, really how kind of people react when the predator returns to the water, because it went from, constantly killing and getting rid of sharks to suddenly the seal population booms, and so the sharks follow the seals, and now there's more shark attacks on Cape Cod because there's more sharks and humans don't like to change. That sounds so depressing, but honestly, I get it. But I thought it was a really good read. Obviously 5 stars. It is so good. And I highly recommend to anyone who is into great whites or anyone who's just interested in learning about Greg Scommel. Greg Scommel is actually in several National Geographic specials. He's in the Orcas versus White Sharks one, which I have seen. And I actually watched it after I purchased this book and went, no, it's the same guy. Yeah, the same guy. And I'm sure he's actually in other ones that I've seen as well, which I thought was really cool, because while I'm reading his book, I'm watching a lot of the documentaries and stuff that he's been in talking about sharks. So this was really cool. Highly recommend for anyone who's into marine biology. The next one I finished was actually an audiobook. It was a recommendation from the church, and I don't remember what we were talking about, which makes me feel awful, but book rec, so I wrote it down. And it's called Let Justice Roll Down by John M. Perkins. This book was so hard to read. It is about a pastor who grew up in Mississippi in the 1940s and has moved to California, where I think his wife was also from Mississippi, but he joined the military. He was in California, and basically God called him back to Mississippi, where they still had really bad segregation issues. And I don't remember everything that happened in the book, but the one that stuck with me is when he was arrested along with several children just for approaching the police station and asking questions. Like, they were not being violent or anything. They were all locked up in the cell, which a lot of people found completely ridiculous. Understandably so. It is so hard to read. It is so hard to listen to this man who was this black pastor who is calling out American Christians, saying, of the 1960s specifically, who were complacent with the status quo of segregation in rural Mississippi. It's so hard. It holds us accountable though, and it's a really good, very interesting read. John M. Perkins is actually still alive, by the way. He's like 95 years old. So very interesting book. I thought it was good. I think it was another 5-star for me. Excellent read. I highly recommend to Christian, non-Christian alike. I recommend. The next one I actually started reading in, I think, October, is The Secret Life of Fungi. I don't remember the author. I'll put the author here. This one was okay. It was very, very evidently written by an enthusiast and is a little bit dry, which you'd think nonfiction is going to be a little bit dry, but this was dry. I got halfway through this book, stopped. It's only 4-hour audiobook, but I started this book, stopped, and then read it again for Nonfiction November. Well, finished it in Nonfiction November just to say, hey, I finished it. But it was a 3-star for me. Very obviously written by an enthusiast. As much as the information on mushrooms was very interesting, she also talked about I think she actually talked about a few recipes and stuff too. And that was all really cool, but just how it was written, I'm like, this is definitely written by somebody who's an enthusiast, not a scientist. But as somebody who's an enthusiast for orcas, I kind of understand as well. The Secret Life Fungi goes into just kind of basics for fungi and mushrooms. I think it kind of goes into noting the differences between, it doesn't really. It felt more like an opinion piece on like, oh, these are cool, than really just a scientific text. I feel like I'm explaining this very badly because I don't remember it because it's not memorable. So that is The Secret Life of Fungi. Now on to the books I started this month but have not finished. The first one being Orca, How We Came to Know and Love. What is the whole Orca? How We Came to Know and Love the Ocean's Greatest Predator. I do have the dust jacket off. It is on the shelf. It's just because dust jackets drive me crazy. I started this book relatively early in the month, and as of, I think it was like Friday, I was on like chapter 6. I'm now on chapter 13 because I finally just kind of buckled down, threw the audiobook in my ears to follow along, and read it that way. Which can get a little annoying because I'm annotating and I will pause it to like put my annotations. But it was more effective than me just trying to read it straight. And I'm like hitting myself going, why didn't I do that earlier? But I am enjoying this book as usual. I have read it before. It is actually, there are some things that are actually quite sad that happen in this text. I was actually quite emotional after one of the whale captures because they had accidentally captured 2 pregnant female orcas, didn't know, and they both gave birth to stillborn calves. That one hurt. But this really goes into the history of whale capture and, well, specifically orca capture, because at the beginning they were pests and people just shot them with rifles because it's like, oh, they're taking the tuna, they're taking the salmon, so there's less for us to eat. Which is not how that works, but ecosystems are so delicate, that's just not how that works. They went from that to currently where I am. They are being sold, and the orca capture is becoming like a lucrative business to put them in oceanariums. SeaWorld has entered the picture, but this is still the 1970s. I'm still in like the early 1970s, so really early into whale capture and research, and people are already having issues with it. Like, there are people who already have problems with the captures. And it really focuses mostly on the detriment to the animals, which was actually very evident to a lot of people, and just simply the cries that these creatures make when they're separated. I'm just like, just make me cry. But I do think the history of this is super important to understand why we love orcas as much as we do. Because if it wasn't for these events, we'd probably still see them as pests and not really care as much as we do about them and about their conservation. For a lot of people, love these animals as much as we do, especially me, because I still love them. But yes, I'm enjoying it. I'm still on page 196. I'm on chapter 13. But I'll take that over chapter 6 like I was earlier in the weekend. So I'm still actively working on this one. I'll probably read it through the rest of this week and hopefully get it done soon. But that is where I am with Orca by Jason M. Colby. And I have to be specific with this because I have another book on my bookshelf called Orca, but it's Orca the Whale called Killer by Eric Hoyt. They are 2 different books. It's also the one I kept checking out from the library until I finally got the 5th edition, which is an updated edition on my shelf for my birthday. Thanks, Mom. But that is where I am on this book. I'm not finished with it, but I'm working on it. And I think I was rushing through it over the weekend, and now I'm like, Nonfiction November's over. I think I'm gonna slow down, but I still wanna finish this by the end of the week, kind of slow down. So that is Orca, How We Came to Know and Love the Ocean's Greatest Predators so far. This one I started I ended up listening to it on Audible at work so I could get it going, and that is Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. This book is so hard to read after his passing. Listening to him tell his story is so hard, especially when he does mention, I don't even know if I can say this on YouTube. He does mention the drug ketamine in the book, and he's like, it's not for me, and knowing how he passed, it's so painful. But I'm actually very surprised at how much he is willing to share in this book. Like, there's a lot of stuff I was not expecting that. So this is one of those, I normally give memoirs like this, like it's an automatic 5-star. I'm not sure why. I think it's mostly because it takes a lot to be honest like this, and he's being very blunt in this book. He is telling it how it happened. He's telling it how it is. This is, I think, the first time I'm not really comfortable rating this at all. And I think it's because of the subject matter. I think it's because of his passing and things. I just don't feel comfortable putting a star rating on it. I will finish it. I've got about 3 hours and 45 minutes left on the audiobook. I'm on chapter 6, which is Bruce Willis. I haven't finished it yet. This is so hard to read, but I think for anyone who was a fan of Friends, was a fan of just Matthew Perry, I think it's an important read. Or someone who was struggling, or someone who's just struggling with the same things he was struggling with. I do think that this is a super important book to give a chance if you're okay with the nitty-gritty details. I'm not done with this yet either, but it was on my TBR, so I thought I'd update. And that is pretty much it. That's pretty much how my nonfiction November went. Not as well as I would have wanted it to, but I guess we can go back to regularly scheduled programming now because I'm going back to a few fiction ones. I was telling my husband I don't need to buy any more books this month because all of my nonfiction November books I already own, but a certain book came out, at least in the Barnes & Noble paperback. That's pretty much it for this video. I'm still working on a couple nonfictions, and you know what, that's okay. But it is what it is, and I said I would give a wrap up when this month was done. So here you go. Anyway, hopefully we'll be back to, hopefully soon we will be back to regularly scheduled programming, and I'll put some reading vlogs and book reviews up soon. I don't know how many I'm gonna get up this month. It is the last month of 2025. Oh my God, it's December. Where did the time go? That's all I have for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a comment on your favorite nonfiction books in the comments below. I could always use a rec, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.